Hinterkaifeck, the massacre on the cursed farm, an unsolved mystery. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain an unsolved case to this day. They occurred on the night of March 31, 1922, on a farm located between the Bavarian towns of Ingolstadt and Schrobenhausen, Germany. The victims: Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, Kazilia Gruber, 72 years old, Joseph Gruber, 31 years old, Victoria Gabriel, 35 years old, Kazilia, granddaughter 7 years old, Joseph, grandson 2 years old, the maid. 6 members of the Gruber family were murdered with a pickaxe or mattock in the barn of their property. The bodies were discovered a few days later, on April 4, 1922. 6 months before the crime, Andreas Gruber found footprints in the snow leading to the farm, but not the other way around. He also found a newspaper that he did not recognize. He also told one of his neighbors that he heard noises in the attic and that he found a newspaper on the porch of the house that none of the family knew where it had come from. And finally, a set of keys had been lost. But even so, the police were not informed. Days before the crime, they realized that someone had been on the farm, the lights in the barn and the house were on, there was food on the table and Andreas Gruber's bed appeared to have been used. A housekeeper left saying that the house was haunted. The new maid arrived at the house on the same day the murders were committed. In addition, the animal's tethers were cut and an axe was not in its usual place. It is believed that on the night of the crime, each family member was lured to the barn where they were murdered, except for the maid and the youngest child who was sleeping, and both were murdered in the house. The murderers stayed on the farm for several days, taking care of the livestock and consuming food. And after the crime, the neighbors noticed the absence of the family. The postman also went to deliver all the letters, but no one answered. And a mechanic spent the whole day repairing machinery without realizing that he had not seen any of the family. When they went to see what was happening, they found the barn locked, and inside it they found the 6 members of the Gruber family murdered in the barn. And the other 2 in the house. As a result of the autopsies, it was concluded that they had died from craniocerebral trauma, and some appeared with signs of strangulation. Most died on the spot except for young Kazilia, who survived several hours despite her injuries. And that the weapon with which they struck the blow was a pickaxe on the night of March 31 and the early morning of April 1. Finding most of them dressed in bedclothes indicated that everything had happened at night. The bodies were piled up and covered with hay, the maid covered with a sheet and little Joseph with his mother's skirt. And also the animals on the farm were not harmed, and were well cared for. And the dog tied up in the barn. According to witnesses, although it was said that the death was on the night of March 31, some saw smoke coming out of the chimney all week, so it was thought that the murderers or murderer had been living in the house all week. Despite the exhaustive police investigation, the case was never solved. Numerous suspects were interrogated, but no conclusive evidence was found. Numerous theories have been proposed to explain the murders, but none has been proven. It was determined that it was not a robbery since no object was missing from the house. Some of the most popular theories include: it has been suggested that the murderer could have been a serial killer who had already committed similar crimes in the past. It has been speculated that the murderer may have had a personal relationship with one of the victims. It has been suggested that the motive could have been a robbery that went wrong. Some people believe that the murders could have been the work of supernatural forces. One of the neighbors accused Andreas Gruber of having an incestuous relationship with his 16-year-old daughter Victoria. The maid found them having relations in the barn, and as a result they were both sentenced to prison in 1914. The suspects: Lorenz Schlittenbauer, he was a suspect due to several details. The dog on the farm barked constantly in his presence, and a witness said that he was not upset by the bodies and seemed to know the property well, which suggested that he had spent time there. However, the police found no concrete evidence to arrest him. Carl Gabriel, it was theorized that Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, could have committed the murders. Although he supposedly died in World War I, his body was never found. It was speculated that he might have returned and, seeing his wife's relationship with Schlittenbauer, acted out of jealousy. However, most of his comrades confirmed his death in the war. Joseph Bartle, the mad baker Joseph Bartle, who escaped from a mental hospital in 1921, was another suspect. Despite many sightings, the police never managed to find him. Political extremists. The possibility that right-wing or left-wing political extremists were involved was considered. Although there was no evidence of Andreas Gruber's political leanings, it was suspected that the farm could have been a hiding place or meeting point for some armed group, provoking reprisals. Subsequent investigations, more than 100 suspects were interrogated without results. The last interview was in 1986. In 2007, students from the police academy in Fürstenfeldbruck concluded that the crime is unsolvable due to the lack of evidence and primitive investigation techniques. However, they identified a prime suspect, but did not name him. Aftermath: the victims were buried in Weidhofen and the skulls were lost during World War II. The farm was demolished in 1923 and a shrine stands near the site. The case of the Hinterkaifeck murders has inspired books, films, and television shows. It has also been the subject of numerous online debates and has generated great interest in the community of amateur investigators. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most mysterious and baffling cases in German criminal history. Despite the years that have passed, the case continues to generate interest and debate. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, it would help me a lot if you subscribed to the channel and gave it a like. And don't forget to leave a comment. I love reading your opinions and suggestions to continue creating content that you like.